Good morning. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Press, your host. I'll be with you for the next hour. You're listening to LibertyRadioLive.com. Thanks for tuning in this morning. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm going to begin this morning with a little bit of a recap. We're currently reading and discussing the book The Vatican Billions by Avro Manhattan. The Rise of Antichrist. We're in the time of the Second World War. But as a matter of recap this morning, to get us all on the same page, kind of refresh where we've been, 1917 was a big year for the Roman Catholic Church. They had the demonic apparition of Fatima, the apparition of Mary, who lies peacefully in her grave, not speaking to anyone, apparently spoke to three little children in Fatima, Portugal, and gave the three children three little secrets. And one of those was a command of Mary that the Roman Catholic Church, or that the Vatican, would consecrate Russia to Mary's Sacred Heart. That means that Russia needs to be conquered and to be made Roman Catholic. So the Vatican, to fulfill this Fatima apparition, secretly supported the Bolshevik Revolution to insert godless communism into Russia for the purpose of destroying the Orthodox Church. Now, to prevent blowback, so that this godless communism would not, after achieving its goal in Russia, threaten the Roman Catholic Church's immense wealth in Europe, rose up the fascists, rose up the Nazi Party to combat the further spread of godless communism into Europe. Now, Hitler at once began to show signs of weakening. The United States entered the war, and the Vatican saw an emergency situation arising where Hitler may lose the war and godless communism might invade Europe and put the Roman Catholic Church's vast landed wealth in jeopardy, further despoiling the Roman Catholic Church of her wealth. So she went into damage control, and she began to move her liquid assets out of Europe and into the West, and all over the West, but particularly the United States of America. We're currently reading in chapter 19 of the book. It's entitled The Vatican Invests Millions in War Industries, Transfers Most of Them to the United States. In an effort to move the Vatican's liquid assets from Europe into the West, it created a Vatican bank called the Istituto per the Opere di Religione, which is the institution for the operation of religion. It was a bank set up supposedly to handle the investments or the management of the wealth of the religious congregations of the Roman Catholic Church. But in fact, what it was a bank set up to move out the Vatican's assets. When Europe was locked down in war, nobody was moving. The Vatican had free rein to do as she pleased, because she's a religious organization, don't you know, and a Christian one at that. So they allowed the Roman Catholic Church this freedom of movement to move these assets out of Europe. And that's exactly what this Vatican Bank was designed to do. Beginning now in the last full paragraph on page 141 of the book, if you're following along, it says, regarding this bank, this Instituto for the operation of religion, it said, for it is precisely what the Instituto did. It transferred increasingly large sums of money from the Vatican to Canada and the United States of America. The valuables were drawn not only from the coffers in Rome, but from all over Italy, from France, even from inside Hitlerite Germany itself. The Pope saw to it that certain very trusted individuals, you can interpret that to mean Catholics or those who are very, very supportive of the Roman Catholic Church, sympathetic to her cause. The Pope saw to it that certain very trusted individuals within the national hierarchies, in Latin, that is the uomini de fiducia, those hierarchies, as they were and still called at the Vatican, are charged with this very delicate task. As Operation, quote, transfer of money from Europe to the Americas, unquote, progressed, more and more interested parties became involved in it. European and American interests jumped on the Vatican bandwagon, particularly since Hitler's military fortunes continued to plunge downward. Okay, Hitler's showing signs of weakening. The Vatican's getting their money out of Europe. And it says American individuals and corporations with stocks and shares in Germany asked the Vatican to help them save what they could from the impending debacle. The Vatican helped, directly and indirectly. It began in earnest to exert increasing pressure upon certain politicians. That's what Rome's best at, exerting pressure on politicians. Remember, the Pope seats and unseats the kings of the earth. That's what the Bible says. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with their unlawful dialogue. The Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, exerted increasing pressure upon certain politicians and even the military to ensure the quote-unquote saving of certain factories, buildings, or installations in various parts of Hitlerite Europe. The pressure to spare such industries, war-geared installations, would in all probability have been exerted independently of the Vatican by interested parties within the United States. Yet it is not amiss to remind ourselves of the fact that at this period the Roman Catholic Church was intimately connected with the war setup, not only because of the basic policy of support for the anti-communist front represented by fascist Europe, but also because of the billions of lira she was invested in the sundry factories within that beleaguered continent. The Church's connection with war industries was not a recent one. It stretched back during the previous decade. The Vatican, in fact, had invested and reinvested in sundry industry concerns via very ingenious and very intricate financial devices. Most of the millions of lira which it had received from the fascist government in 1929 and 1930 with the signing of the Lateran Agreement. This was the seed money that was given the Vatican by Mussolini, and this has turned into billions of dollars now. And in heavy investments, stocks and bonds, and particularly war-making industries. Now it says at that time, its policy was to use part of the capital in certain booming Italian munition plants, which Mussolini had set in motion in preparation for the forthcoming invasion of Abyssinia in 1935 and 36. When fascist Italy did eventually invade Abyssinia, these plants naturally became the main suppliers of the invading armies. The Vatican authorities kept a discreet silence about their participation in the profitable enterprise. War is always a profitable enterprise for the Vatican. She foments those wars to increase her strength and her wealth in the world. War is a money-making operation for the Vatican. It says, fascist Italy saw to it that the Vatican should not be embarrassed in the matter, at least in the financial field, since in the political she came openly to the fore by supporting Mussolini's adventure. While it is true that Pope Pius XI personally was not directly involved in all this, he nevertheless did not reprimand the Italian Church for the Abyssinian invasion. Concerning the financial support, or rather partnership, which she gave Mussolini, the Pope was little aware of the Vatican's financial interest in it all, since the finances were not in his hands. Here's key information now. It says a group of specialists had dealt and were dealing with them as they thought fit. So Rome hands over the investments of her riches to certain individuals who manage her money. And it says the ramifications and intricacies of their investments were certainly beyond the Pope's comprehension. So says the author. And it says, the Vatican's millions have been dispersed in profitable ventures, among which were the chemical and war enterprises which now were supplying Mussolini's armies. The chief engineer of Vatican involvement in war profiteering was a legendary financial wizard, a Signor Nogara. This man, who in fact controlled and played with the Vatican's money for decades, multiplied her millions 100-fold. His rule was to exclude theology and religion from essentially financial matters. And his motto was that of Pope Benedict XV, business is business. And you'll see this departure throughout Rome's history. Religion is just a cover for the Vatican's diabolical activities in the world. The religious front of the Roman Catholic Church is a facade. She's a dictator, a tyrant, a warmongering whore. And the United States and the American people, particularly Protestants, and even more particularly the ecumenical evangelicals in this country who are uniting with this institution called the Vatican in the ecumenical movement, need to be aware of this information and make a break with Rome and reunite with Christ and the truth. Now it says Pope Benedict, it should be remembered, invested some of the Vatican's money with the Turks. All right, the age-old enemy of the Roman Catholic Church. The Vatican was desperate to move her investments wherever they would receive the greatest gains, even if she invested her money with her worst enemy, many would say, the Turks. You know where she's going to invest her money now? In Protestant USA. That Protestantism that once threatened the very life of the Roman Catholic Church, she's going to invest her money right here in Protestant USA. Watch and see. It says, war industries have always been celebrated for the profits they yield. Nogara's policy of investing with them continued after the Abyssinian venture. He invested in allied industries, chemicals, steel plants, and the like. From fascist Italy, he extended into semi-fascist Yugoslavia, Albania, and above all, Nazi Germany. Thus, the Vatican, prior to the Second World War, had many of its millions involved with a vast complex producing war materials. The secretive financial transactions of Nogara saw to it that they became gold mines for the Vatican. Nogara also linked Vatican finances with certain large U.S. corporations. When eventually the U.S. was drawn into the conflict and these were geared to war production, the Vatican began to make considerable profits on the other side of the Atlantic. Its financial involvement with the vast war industries of Europe and America has never been fully disclosed and probably never will be. But indirect and direct evidence from unexpected quarters confirmed its reality and also its extent, although unfortunately details are lacking. A friend of the present author, Dom Luigi Sturzo, had personal information about the Vatican's war involvement from the Pope himself, that is, from Pope Pius XII, the very man who had signed the treaty with Mussolini and who, in a moment of elation, had called the Duce, quote, the man sent by divine providence, unquote. We've already seen why the Vatican had backed right-wing extremists between the two world wars to contain advancing communism at home and abroad. This we have dealt with in detail in another work, The Vatican in World Politics. Dom Sturzo was no mean figure. He was the founder of the Italian Catholic Party, the only political party which could have stopped Mussolini from becoming dictator. Pope Pius XII, following secret political deals with Mussolini, commanded Sturzo to disband his movement. Sturzo did so. He went into exile, mostly spent in London. Sturzo was, however, kept well informed about most of the Vatican's important activities. A year or two before the outbreak of the Second World War, Pope Pius XI realized that he had made a political mistake in supporting fascism. He tried, but in vain, to remedy the results. He resumed contact with Dom Luigi. Among other things, he informed the ex-leader of the Catholic Party of his quote-unquote deep sorrow that much Vatican money had been involved in the war industries of Italy during the Abyssinian War, but there was nothing he could do about it, since financial matters were in the hands of certain quote-unquote lay people who did what they wanted with them. He also told him that the Italian factories were preparing for a world war. Yes, the Pope can invest in war materials and then blame it on the lay people in charge of handling his finances. It's all for political consumption, ladies and gentlemen. The Roman Catholic Church knows precisely what it's doing in the world. She's the most calculating institution on the planet, and war is one of her most tried and true means of conquering the world. This Nicolaitan attitude of the Roman Catholic Church, world conquest, the end game is a new world order, and that's what plagues our society and the world today. Rome's greed for control and for wealth and for power. Now it says, after the war, Sturzo returned to Italy and his Catholic Party was renamed the Christian Democratic Party. Dom Sturzo was determined to expose the Vatican involvement with fascism. He had seen documents supplied to him not only by anti-fascist Catholics, but also by certain delegates to the Nuremberg trials. When Pope Pius XII heard of this, he forbade Dom Sturzo to, quote, meddle with things past, unquote, lest he harm the Church in her endeavors to, quote, reconstruct a new Europe, unquote. And wasn't that the motive of all this anyway? To reconstruct Europe, to bring forth a new Holy Roman Empire in Europe? Rome backed Nazi Germany so that with the hope that Nazi Germany could conquer not only Russia and defeat and destroy the Orthodox Church and consecrate Russia to the Sacred Heart of Mary, but to reestablish the old Roman Empire where the Pope ruled supreme. That was the main objective of the papacy. It was indeed to reconstruct Protestant Europe back into a Catholic superstate. And it says, once more, Sturzo had to obey. But the most damning proof of the Vatican involvement in the war industries came from an even more unusual source, this time from Yugoslavia, from a friend of the present author, General Bora Murkowski. General Bora Murkovic, And it says, when in 1941, Yugoslavia signed a pact with Hitler, General Murkovic, on March 27, 1941, unseated the government, abrogated the pact, and brought Yugoslavia in on the side of the Allies. The importance of the move was tremendous. and directly affected the course of the Second World War. That this was so was proved at the Nuremberg trials. Quote, "It became crystal clear that the decision of 27 March 1941 to choose certain destruction of their homes and country by Hitler rather than the dishonor of being his accomplices had a decisive effect upon history. Hitler's war plan was totally upset." Quote, "Hitler reacted immediately. He at once summoned a meeting of his generals and of his commanders of his satellites. In his secret report of this meeting, held on that same day, he underlined that the beginning of the Barbarossa operation will have to be postponed for up to 4 weeks. Now, the Barbarossa operation was a code word, a code name for the attack against Bolshevik Russia. So that was the main objective of the war, and it had to be postponed because of this new alignment of Yugoslavia with the Allies. And it says, the 4 weeks delay forced upon Hitler by General Merkovich was decisive for the whole war, according to Karl Ritter, German Foreign Office liaison officer with the Nazi High Command. Quote, "This delay," he stated, "cost the Germans the winter battle before Moscow, and it was there that the war was lost." Unquote. This is quoted by Anthony Eden, British Foreign Minister, later Lord Avon, in his work called The Memoirs. Now, Winston Churchill that same morning told the British people, quote, "I have great news. Early this morning, the Yugoslav nation found its soul." Unquote. Now, remember, Yugoslavia was predominantly Orthodox. The Orthodox faith, the product of the first great schism of the Roman Catholic Church. The Yugoslavic nation was Orthodox, Greek Orthodox. Now it says the writer emphasizes all this to show how General Merkovich contributed to history and was not one to talk about important matters lightly or without proof. What he revealed to the writer should therefore be taken at its face value and not dismissed with a shrug, since the events just related have had a direct bearing upon our present subject, the Vatican's financial participation in the vast sphere of war industry. General Merkovich never mentioned any specific figure or even individual names, but nevertheless, the impact of the revelation concerning the Vatican's financial involvement in the war made a tremendous impression upon him, to such an extent that he took a decision which, had it been successfully carried out, would have resulted in a tremendous calamity for world culture. He claimed to have come across financial and diplomatic documents which revealed the extent to which certain Italian financial interests had been involved in supplying war materials to Yugoslavia, controlling interest in Yugoslav armament manufacture, and above all, closely linked with the Nazi war machinery, and that these were closely associated with concerns directly manipulated by the Vatican wizard Nogara. It seemed, always according to General Merkovich, that the Vatican became so involved. We're going to return immediately to the book, and I'm impressed that I may be going a bit too fast. We're talking about General Merkovich, who came upon certain information that revealed intense Vatican activity in supplying war materials to Yugoslavia. And this was for the purpose of extirpating and annihilating the Greek Orthodox Church in Yugoslavia. The purpose of that was to create a Roman Catholic fascist state in Croatia, to be added to the proposed or the hopeful new Holy Roman Empire that Hitler was to achieve in Europe. Okay, Merkovich claimed to have come across financial and diplomatic documents which revealed the extent to which certain Italian financial interests, in other words, Vatican interests, held under the cover of certain Italian companies. These are war-making industries now. Italian financial interests had been involved in supplying war materials to Yugoslavia, controlling interest in Yugoslav armament manufacture, and above all, closely linked with the Nazi war machinery, and that these were closely associated with concerns directly manipulated by the Vatican wizard Nogara. So we've uncovered, or rather Merkovich has uncovered, intense Vatican interest in Yugoslavia, in the war-making industry. It continues, it says, it seemed always, according to General Merkovich, that the Vatican became so involved with the three partners, Yugoslavia, Italy, and Germany, that it could be regarded a silent associate of this unholy trio. In other words, the Vatican fomented the entire Second World War. This is what lends so much credence. What was discovered in Yugoslavia lends so much credence to the reality that it was the popes that were behind the Second World War. And it says the general's bitterness was the greater since practically all the contraband weapons and armory which the Catholic Croats, the Ustashi, had assembled, and which shortly afterwards they used ruthlessly against Yugoslavia itself, had been supplied from such quarters so that Ustashi had been directly financed not only by Mussolini, but also by Pope Pius XII. General Merkovich had planned to collect all the relevant documents, but the urgency of Hitler's attacks upon Yugoslavia diverted his attention from the matter of the Vatican's involvement. Be that as it may, he was so incensed that he decided there and then to send several squadrons of the Yugoslav Air Force to bomb the Vatican. One squadron was assembled and made ready one night for the raid, but just before orders were given, there was a sudden worsening of the weather, and the squadron had to remain grounded. General Merkovich's bombing expedition had to be postponed, and he decided to try a couple of days later. The postponement saved the Vatican City from obliteration, for shortly afterwards the Yugoslav Air Force was crippled by Nazi bombers which swept over and destroyed most of the Yugoslav craft on the ground. It was thus one of the paradoxes of the Second World War that the Catholic Church owed the salvation of its headquarters, the Vatican, to none other than Adolf Hitler. The destruction of Vatican City, with all its immense treasures of religion, art, and history, would have been unforgivable, a loss beyond reckoning for Western civilization. Nevertheless, we have related the episode to show that a man of the caliber and honesty of General Merkovich, confronted by the financial involvement of the Vatican in the profitable business of war, could be made to lose his better judgment, says this author. I'd have been rooting for Merkovich if you ask me. But we know what Bible prophecy says, that the whore of Rome is going to exist until that stone, which was cut out of the mountain without hands, strikes the image in the feet at the time of the Roman Empire, at the very end of the Roman Empire, and he grinds the whole image to powder and it blows away with the wind. We've got no hope that anything will become of the Vatican, the Roman Catholic Church, until Christ returns. And it says, as hinted above, the extent of such involvement at this period will in all probability never be disclosed, although no doubt screened by the financial convolutions of certain huge giant industrial giants, it might one day be unearthed and brought to light. While the testimony of the two distinguished and responsible personages we have cited has little support in terms of facts and figures, it may stand as relevant to our inquiry. The result of the war policy of the Catholic Church, or rather of the skillful moves she undertook when Nazi fortunes began to decline, was that when finally Hitler shot himself in a Berlin shelled by the Red Army, Pope Pius XII, in the total collapse of Hitlerian Catholic Europe, had at least the satisfaction of having salvaged something by the transfer of millions of dollars to the United States. The flow of Catholic investments did not stop with the cessation of hostilities, but continued unabated for some years afterwards. For while it was true that the Red Army had been stopped from sweeping over defeated Europe, that the United States had become Europe's protector, and that the Vatican had successfully initiated a political ideological partnership with her, it was nonetheless also true that the communists of France, and above all of Italy, were seriously threatening to take over the government in Paris and Rome. So the threat of communism upon the Vatican was still a concern. Rome had to get her assets in a place where they could be secured and used to further prosper the Roman Catholic Church. And it said that spelled the danger for the Vatican, so it continued its transfer policy throughout the years immediately after the war. The danger became real and immediate during the first decade. Pope Pius XII deemed it necessary to intervene, and he ordered the Italian electorate to vote for the Catholic Party. There's the Vatican's involvement in politics again. Anyone voting for the communists or even for the socialists would be excommunicated, said the Pope. And it says, while stemming the Red Menace, the Vatican began to look around post-war Europe with an eye to investing its millions wherever these millions could best be made to yield good dividends. And as Europe began to boom, and sundry quote-unquote economic miracles succeeded one another, the Vatican's financial expertise was set in motion. Her skill and intuition in choosing the right investments proved highly successful once more. She redoubled her efforts to consolidate her funds with prosperous industrial and commercial shares, stocks, and bonds, with mounting boldness in private, governmental, small and large concerns, not only in Italy but also in France, Germany, Switzerland, and even in England. How does Rome multiply her massive financial wealth? Through stocks and bonds, because of insider trading. Devout Roman Catholics in high positions in finance give Rome the best tips there are. Rome always gets the first shot. Now, the Vatican unashamedly invests its money in Riviera casinos, such as the San Remo, in beverages as alien to holy water as the water Perrier in France, in the Societe Generale Immobiliare, already mentioned, and in building concerns. Senior Vittorio Valletta, head of the automobile giant Fiat of Turin, and Senior Presenti, head of the Italcementi cement group, were directories of such concerns. L'Immobilier assets in real estate in 1969 and 70 were valued at between 18 and 19 million pounds sterling. This company also controlled numerous industrial, touristic, and other concerns, including 3/4 of Rome's Hilton Hotel. Sogin, a large branch of the Immobilier, owned other companies in which the Vatican was a large shareholder, and which had a board of directors which included representatives of the Bostaggi financial concern, Italpi, and the big insurance company, I'll see if I can pronounce this, Assicurazioni Generali, Ceramica Pozzi, Italgas, Aqua Maria, the Pentanella milling and pasta concerns, and many similar enterprises. It should be remembered that the Vatican did not pay any taxes in Italy, as in so many other countries, so that for decades it held a continuous and unfair advantage over its commercial, industrial, and financial rivals, as much out to make profit as was the Roman Catholic Church. So this is the grievous error of the nations in giving the Vatican, the most covetous institution on the earth, financial benefit, financial privilege by not taxing her. She wins because she has this advantage. And if only the world would recognize what God has told us in the Scriptures about this institution, and what facts on the ground reveal and confirm what the Bible says about this institution called the Roman Catholic Church. If the world would just wake up to what Avro Manhattan is revealing to us in this book, that the Roman Catholic Church, just as all the Protestant reformers insisted, the Roman Catholic Church is that prophesied in the Bible, that whore that rides the bloody beast, the Antichrist, the church of Satan in the world. And we deprive her of her privilege and her advantage in economic affairs and put the whore back in her box. Now, continuing, it says, the grossly anachronistic treatment of the Church's financial tax-exempt manipulations vis-a-vis her financial rivals was too blatant not to provoke a general reaction to her privileged status, especially in view of the fact that while profiting from the services rendered by the state to her and paid for by the ordinary taxpayer, that's right, she gets much of her power through tax money. We support her institutions. She gave nothing whatsoever in return, not even any kind of ex gratia offering out of the enhanced profits which resulted from her immunity from taxation. In Italy, this anomaly was increasingly resented, but the efforts of various movements to make the Vatican pay taxes was consistently defeated by the dominant Catholic Party. Finally, in 1968, a climax was reached when the Vatican, after endless legal devices, found itself cornered and agreed to submit to a partial form of taxation, quote, on its stock earnings, unquote. On its stock earnings. Quite a concession. It says the payment due proved to be no less than 1,000 billion lira per year. That's 1 trillion lira per year. Just on the profits made on stock earnings. What does that tell you about the wealth of the Roman Catholic Church? It says this sum revealed the enormous financial assets which the Roman Catholic Church controlled in Italy alone, making her, the Roman Catholic Church, not only a paramount political force, but also an economic factor of the utmost importance in the life of the nation. Nino Lobello, the economic financial correspondent of the New York Herald Tribune, has summarized in detail the paramountcy of the Vatican investments and economic hold in a book well worth studying. The economic weight of the Vatican's wealth and hold on Italian finance, industry, and commerce had now become one of the main factors in the prosperity of the Italian peninsula. The authoritative economist of London at this period did not hesitate to say as much. Quote, this economist is an economic news magazine in London. It says this, The Vatican could theoretically throw the Italian economy into confusion if it decided to unload all its shares suddenly and dump them on the market, unquote. So clearly you can see the entire Italian economy is beholden to the Vatican. At the snap of a finger, the Pope could destroy the economy of Italy. And I'm here to maintain that if the same were the case in the United States, that she could bring down the economy of this country. And what are we seeing today? What are we seeing today? Economic collapse. Might we suppose that the Vatican has plans to collapse the economy of the United States and is capable of doing it? We're going to be talking about this in this book. Now, continuing, it says, how large was the Roman Catholic Church's Italian portfolio 25 years after the Second World War? The answer to the question is a difficult one, since the Vatican is the only state which has consistently refused to disclose its real budget or let quote-unquote outsiders know the value of its assets. But unofficial estimates by Italian governments at various times, based on scanty information they were able to come by, seemed to coincide with the nebulous hints dropped by the Vatican. According to these estimates, the Holy See owned between 15 and 20% of the total stocks quoted on the Italian stock exchange. That's 20% of the economy. In December of 1964, the total value of all these shares was 5,500 billion lira. That's 5.5 trillion lira, which put the capital invested by the Vatican as early as 1964 in Italian stocks alone at about $500 million. By 1972, this had risen to above $700 million. Yet the Vatican's investments in Italy represented, according to reliable Vatican sources, only between 1/10 and 1/12 of the whole of its world investments. 1/10 to 1/12 of the whole of its world investments. All right, we've been talking about Rome's investment and control of the Italian economy. And those investments, according to the Vatican sources, is only 1/10 to 1/12 of its world investments. And they keep telling me, Tom, the Roman Catholic Church just doesn't have the power. It doesn't have the financial strength to do what you're proposing. This book says otherwise. Now, continuing, it says this gives the total astronomical figure of $5,000 million. That's $5 billion at a conservative estimate. Now, Chapter 20 is entitled, Why the Catholic Church is the Richest Church in America. This is where the listeners need to pay attention. This financial colossus called the Roman Catholic Church can make or break the financial structure of this country. It says the United States is nominally a Protestant country. It prides itself on its separation of church and state. It harbors over 300 prosperous Protestant denominations. Yet the Roman Catholic Church in the United States is the United States' largest single religious unit. She is the most closely knit, with the exception perhaps of the Jewish fraternity. She is the most powerful, ethically, socially, and politically, and she is the richest church of them all, not only in the United States, but in the whole of the Northern Hemisphere, and indeed in all the Americas, North, Central, and South. Did you know that the Roman Catholic Church is bigger than all 300 of the Protestant denominations in this country? It's the largest religious organization in the United States of America. and she holds proportionately as many seats in federal and state and local governments. She is well represented in government. And if her numbers are equal to that of all 300 of the denominations which represent in government, she controls the highest offices. Rome dominates politics in this country, and it's time for God's people to wake up and investigate this for themselves. Now, the Roman Catholic Church spectacular status in the North cannot be comprehended at one single glance. Although the largest single religion, yet she's still a minority with some 50 million adherents out of a population of approximately 200 million. Now, that's according to the time of the writing of this book in the 80s. Now, it says the explanation, of course, could be found in the elementary formula: divisibility creates weakness, unity, strength. But even while accepting the veracity of this, the Catholic phenomenon is still not easy to understand. Here we are concerned with the wealth amassed by the Roman Catholic Church in the United States. The process and the results need clarification, not only when dealing with the instrumentality of gathering and multiplying riches. The basic method of collecting data about bonds, stocks, and shares, while applicable to a steel corporation or even to Coca-Cola, is not appropriate to the Roman Catholic Church. Besides being a corporation, or rather a multi-corporation in the ordinary lay significance of that word, she is simultaneously a religious system, and the accumulation of her wealth derives solely from her being so. Religion is still the greatest imponderable of society. The United States, the most materially prosperous land in the world, is deeply affected by its religious imponderable, even more than Europe was in the past, or still is in the present. Such an intangible factor is basically identifiable with her religious credences. The latter, notwithstanding their ideological, denominational, and ecclesiastical diversities, and even contradictions, have one common denominator. They spend a most unedifying amount of energy upon the accumulation of material wealth in the guise of opulent, costly, and numerous edifices, skillful acquisition, and remunerative exploitation of urban areas, and by the collection and investment of dollars and cents throughout the nation. These predominantly financial and business operations are promoted, carried out, and indeed are energized by the intangible and yet concrete reality of the sundry beliefs operating via and within the framework of organized religion. Unless this basic factor is taken into account, the phenomenon of the fantastic wealth of the churches of America cannot be fully understood. It might be argued with justification that the phenomenon is not peculiar to the United States of America. It is not. Yet in Europe, it took centuries, if not millennia, of organized religion to control sizable portions of the collective wealth of the sundry European nations. And I'll just tell you, not so in the United States. It happened rapidly. It happened over a period of decades. And now, having arrived in the 21st century, the Roman Catholic Church has arisen to a controlling financial, religious, and political institution, and we're all about to suffer the consequences of allowing it to happen.